All right. Welcome, everyone. We're super excited to have you here today. We have two alumni from Career Strategy Lab, the job search accelerator that I run with a team of 4 people, specifically focused on helping UX and product people navigate their job searches. And so we have Craig, who is joining us, and we have Meg, who will be joining us shortly. And really, they're just going to share about their experience, what was going on in their kind of world before they joined Career Strategy Lab, what prompted them to join, some of the highlights for them, and of course, how did they get hired into their current roles. So that's what we're going to do first. And then we are going to do a mini, and by mini, I mean, I'm going to try and keep it under 10 minutes, portfolio workshop with like a very, very narrowly focused part of creating a portfolio that I see a lot of people really mess up. So we're going to go over that. And then I'm going to share more about Career Strategy Lab. We had a bunch of you emailing us, asking about more details and all these questions about it. So we have a little bit about what exactly is inside that job search accelerator. And from the Career Strategy Lab team, we have myself, Sarah, in case we haven't met yet. I'm the founder and CEO. We also have Becca, one of the coaches inside Career Strategy Lab. And we have Aaron also. Becca and Aaron will probably be responding to questions that you may ask in the chat. So just so you know who they are, that's the awesome people replying to your questions. And then we're going to get started. So to kick us off, Meg and Craig, also I love your names rhyme. All right, we would love to hear from each of you. And Craig, maybe we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you do specifically in the world of UX and product, because it's a wide range of things, right? Tell us what you're doing now and a little bit more about what were you doing in your job search before you joined Career Strategy Lab. And then Meg, we'll go to the same questions for you asked after that one.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Brooks. I'm on the west coast of the US. I'm near Seattle. I am a lead UX designer at Dexcom right now. Prior roles, I was staff or senior staff at Compass, and similar, I had 10 years at Amazon. Kind of in the bigger picture of coming to CSL, I had been doing interviews previous about 6 months, and getting to spaces where I'd like to get proper feedback. And going through the CSL journey helped me find the right places to ask for that feedback with I'll call it the CSL crew. And it became a really good system for me to then hone those questions and then prepare a portfolio, not just kind of a web view, but like a how to walk through portfolio and how to actually aim my attentions at companies that I was interested in with a piece they called the compass statement, and especially in my portfolio presentations with the hardest part, which is the headlines. But I spent a lot of time with that, and I believe that's what made the difference in my job search. Is there more you want me to dive in more, or where?
No, that was great. And just make sure I heard you right. You said you were job searching for 6 months before, and you were, I think, getting some interviews, but you weren't making it all the way to the offer stage. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. I wasn't getting to offer stage. I was very close, and I still get follow-ups, which is kind of crazy, like months later. And it shows that there was some connection, but I think the CSL program helped me get over that, I'll call last little step in the clarity, especially in the clarity of the portfolio piece. I had someone in the program with the kind of leaders you share stuff with, where I could get feedback. Do I really need to show this? Is this too much information? Is there not enough information? Or is it even relevant to show in a kind of a portfolio walkthrough? And the ability to get that feedback, I think, builds the confidence that is recognizable when you're going into a kind of final step of an interview process. You have the ability to kind of understand that, yeah, it does make sense, or this might be the part where you want to move a little faster through.
And one last question before we get to Meg. Do you recall, like, was there a specific tipping point or a moment in, your journey before you decided to join Career Strategy Lab where you thought, I got to do something different? Like, do you remember a specific moment or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call any companies out. I mean, they reached out after the program too. So, excuse me, I went through a full loop. I did 7 interviews, and then I did a full 2-day loop over a 2-month period, and it just kept dragging on. And I don't want to say like put me on the bench. Sounds funny, but it wasn't an offer. It was like, we'll get back to you. And that's a point where I was like, something's not gelling. I don't know what it is. And I want to find someone where I can share my actual stuff with someone and get feedback with, like Aaron and Becca in the program. They were able to give me some pointers, or at least point out how to think about structuring as I went through the process.
Yeah, one of the things we see all the time, and maybe you agree with this in hindsight, and Meg too, is like when it comes to all of these, what we call career marketing materials, the collection of your resume, your LinkedIn, your portfolio, et cetera, you get to this point where you're too close to it.
Yeah.
And you need to like have someone kind of help you see it through the lens of the actual recruiters, hiring managers, et cetera, to help you identify like where is the story off in the slightest way or in a big way. It depends from person to person.
I think I mean, the way the program's set up really help me guide into only applying to places I wanted to work. So as part of the process, you do a compass statement, and that's not just a random compass statement. You have in your program that you put together. So you have very succinct things you go through and learn about that. And that then evolves into all the other pieces, into your resume, into the computer read as resume, how to think about that, which then leads into your LinkedIn, how to think about that, and then how that all translates into how you share your presentation in a portfolio presentation for a UX role. And I think that would also apply to research as well. So it's kind of like stepping stones. The hardest part is really acknowledging who you want to be in the compass statement, and then you connect all the dots, and you get to your kind of final piece, which is the portfolio presentation, and then getting those into the headlines, and honing those headlines so they're pointed and they make sense, and that helps as you talk through your portfolio presentation to really have a story.
Totally. Yeah. Let's jump over to Meg, and then I want to dive deeper into a little bit more, like you touched on confidence, and I know mindset is a big thing, but Meg, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, because you're recently hired. I forget if it was in August or May-ish. And then a little bit about your journey and job search before you entered the world of Career Strategy Lab.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the open house. So nice to have you all here today. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Meg. I have a little bit of a non-traditional background within user experience. I'm a researcher. That's my area of focus. And I worked at Google for 12 years. But I got my start in sort of voice of the customer feedback kind of work, and then expanded into sort of product user experience work. And so figuring out a way to tell my story and talk about my experience, I think was a big challenge, and why I came to CSL. You asked about aha moments, Sarah, but I, like Craig, had kind of gotten to a point where I was getting some good traction in terms of interviews, but I'd been through 4 full round cycles with like no offer. And I just got this sense, we're user experience folks, like our empathy, our ability to read a room, I think is pretty strong. And I just got this sense that like I was doing really well at the initial interviews, but when it came to presenting the case study, there was something that just wasn't clicking and translating with the audience. And so I got this sense that my storytelling there was something that I really wanted to improve and make better. So that's why I came to CSL. I recently just started working at Nextdoor. I'm a researcher there. We're actually looking to work with some folks on the design side. So if anybody's interested, please, I'm sure my contact information will be shared, but feel free to get in touch. And I am based here in San Francisco, if we've got any San Francisco friends in the house. The last thing I'll sort of share about my experience, which may resonate with a few of you folks, I actually went through back-to-back layoffs. And I think a lot of us are sort of experiencing that today. And so, I'd been at Google for a very long time, to the point where I don't think I even had a resume at the time that we went through massive layoffs out there. So a lot of my materials, I basically had to create from scratch. And CSL was a really great program and framework to sort of like start to think about building a lot of those things from the ground up. And I think the other thing, Craig talked about the compass statement and just getting clear on your purpose and where you want to go next. I think sometimes after a layoff, you can be just like such a jarring experience. So it's taking some time to reflect and really figure out, okay, where do I want to work next? What about my past experience did I enjoy? What did I not enjoy? And how do I want to set myself up for success? And then the other piece that I'll mention, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, so Craig and I were actually in the same cohort. We were like in CSL at the same time. And there's just so much support that you get from being part of the group, to be able to have the critiques and be able to be in a safe space where you can get that feedback, but also to be able to check in with folks and just ask about their process and how things are going. Applying for jobs can be a gauntlet. It can be really draining, and feeling like you're not in it alone was a really big piece for me as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
The shell shock after layoffs. I definitely felt that. That's a good word for that.
Yeah, like we never see, for the most part, layoffs coming, or you think, no, it's not going to happen to me, right? And it's easy to get into this, kind of panic mode somewhat, because if you're in a situation where, you don't have updated resume, portfolio, et cetera, like there's that added pressure on top of just the stress of the layoff and things like that. But both of you mentioned this idea of a compass or compass statement. And for everyone who is not in CSL, Career Strategy Lab and what we do is divide it into 5 sprints. We've sprintified this overwhelming process of getting your resume, getting your portfolio, your LinkedIn profile, networking, applying to jobs, all that. We've broken it down into these sprints. And the first sprint that we do is the design your career roadmap sprint. And part of that is coming up with this compass statement or elevator pitch for yourself. And we do this because products that don't have roadmaps generally don't work out very well. I mean, I've worked with enough startups and founders to know, and maybe some of you are in a company like this right now where there is no roadmap, like it's kind of not a great experience. The same applies to you, because ultimately you are a product, right? Companies are, quote, buying you, hiring, but if we want to get literal, they're buying you, the product of you. And so you need to have this very clear roadmap and elevator pitch for yourself. And Craig and Meg, I'm curious, your hindsight on this, but what we find is when you try and do your resume, portfolio, et cetera, without that literal compass, it's very difficult. But once you do have clarity about your career direction, et cetera, it makes the creation of that resume, portfolio, even what jobs you should apply to, it gives you guardrails, which I think is a big part of why people love that first sprint so much.
Yeah, I think it's almost like akin to design principles, right? There's all these like decisions that you make throughout this process of like, okay, which project do I want to highlight, or what's the case study that I'm going to showcase? You can kind of get an analysis paralysis of like which is the best option, and really being grounded in what type of story you want to tell or what the roadmap is for you, I think just makes all of those decisions a lot easier as you sort of, as Sarah said, sort of move through the sprints here.
I think it's important to note that it's one of the hardest steps for anybody And it's one of the most important things it's for you to understand you. And it's a little bit by you, but there's great help from the CSL team. And that's really important. But there's also as Meg mentioned, we were in the same cohort. There's others who you find are like, oh, you were laid off too. So it's not, all the feelings that come with maybe a situation like that. You find others in the program who've gone through similar situations. How are they thinking about their approach to their career, or maybe applying to companies, or what companies and what type of work? So I'll use the word UX. That can go to a lot of different ways: governmental, educational, travel. There's a wide variety, and it helps kind of narrow into what resonates with you, and then being able to share that, and you get feedback from the CSL leadership, but also the community, which was a big part for me. And I spent quite a bit of time reaching out.
Yeah, and both of you have mentioned, the community and the peer element of Career Strategy Lab. And as I was, literally designing the whole experience around Career Strategy Lab, one of the things that kind of guided me, I guess my compass for creating this whole program, was that so many people try and approach all of this in a vacuum, almost in secret. And they also rely on kind of one-off feedback from a colleague, a former boss, a mentor on a mentoring platform, et cetera. And all of those kind of modalities of feedback are totally fine. But the challenge happens, like, let's say an hour from now, you have a call with a mentor who's going to look at your resume or something. You might get some good feedback, but then you're still on your own on the weekend, trying to implement that feedback or think about it or process it and stuff. And so one of the real values, as Meg and Craig have said, their benefits of Career Strategy Lab is this group elements where you are surrounded by other people who are laser focused on exactly, the same sprints you're doing. And everyone is kind of playing by the same song sheet, or whatever the right phrase is for that. And so you don't get caught up in a lot of this conflicting information that you see swooshing across your social feeds and things like that, because everyone has recognized, look, I need to stop getting into information collecting mode. I just need to take action. And because everyone is taking action from the same kind of principles and steps in these sprints, it makes the group experience really powerful from what we hear from people.
I do want to note that some of these steps, will be easier and some will be more challenging, but that challenge is what makes the discovery of who you want to be and what you want to do even more great. And reach out to people. Does this stuff that I'm sharing with everyone make sense? Does it, so getting that feedback. And I also found it really great. I was really grateful to be able to add comments to others as they were doing their work, because it really got me back into the feeling that not only are they helping me, but I'm helping them, which is a really great way to work.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Craig. It's a really powerful feeling. I think searching for a job can feel really powerless. You're doing all these things and you're waiting to sort of see the impact of that come to fruition. And there's a bit of patience that comes in, but there's something really great about being able to give back to other people and have people sort of help you along the way that comes out of this cohort. I think that's a really great point. I was also going to add, I think it's also great to see other people submit sort of parts of this work throughout the process and see how the questions that they ask, or where they feel like they're getting blocked as they're submitting this stuff for critique, and having that be sort of a safe group space sort of process, because I think you learn a lot, not just about your own materials, but about how other people are sort of putting their projects together or thinking about their portfolio, thinking about their resume. And sometimes they're maybe not questions you would have thought to ask directly, but they can help sort of shape and inform and make your own materials or your own sort of process smarter too. So I feel there's a lot of just really great sort of peer knowledge sharing that comes up throughout that process as well.
Yeah, it's almost just being in this container of this group experience and not being, off in a silo by yourself, you're able to learn, as you said, Meg, like you might feel like, because we have these Q&A calls every Tuesday, you might think to yourself, oh, I don't have anything to ask on the call today. I think I won't show up. But if you show up, even if you don't ask a question, as you said, you'll probably have some like lightning bolt moment, which makes you think, aha, that other person who's a researcher did X, Y, Z. Now I see how that can like unblock me in, something I'm struggling with on this research project in my portfolio or something like that. So yeah, that is a huge, huge part of it.
I also want to shout out the Wednesday mindset calls. I went in I don't need mindset, but I found the ability for folks to share initially gave me the permission to share that, I'm not alone on this kind of crazy journey that the tech world is in right now. And so that helped me immensely, way more than I would have anticipated before I did the program.
Yeah, the mindset calls, gosh, I forget when we added them. I want to say it was 2022, I think, Aaron and Becca, which blows my mind. But those were added really as a way to help address like a lot of the things that hold many people back in their careers, frankly, but especially in the process of let's just get the resume done, get the portfolio done. And so a lot of the topics on these mindset calls kind of surround themes of confidence, imposter syndrome, productivity, doubting your own skill set because maybe the job you just came from or were let go from was a situation where you had a boss who was not so encouraging, or you just kind of feel like deflated, or in some cases just like traumatized from your past work experience. And so these mindset calls are a place to, I think, number one, help you realize you're not the only person that struggles with these things. And then number two, have this like focused, supportive place that is not publicly like laying it all out on LinkedIn or something. And every Wednesday we have these calls, and the show, I don't know, I forget how many people on average show up, but it's sometimes more than the Q&A calls, to be honest. Yeah. So mindset is a big, big part of it. And I think too, when your mindset is blocked, let's say, I think it's easy to kind of undersell yourself. And then when you do learn to manage those thoughts of confidence and imposter and things like that, it helps you realize, no, wait a second. I am really awesome. The work I did was awesome. Maybe my boss was a jerk or my team members were jerks. But when I look at this project in my portfolio now, regardless of like what happened in the job and on the team, this work is awesome. And so I think the mindset calls are really powerful in helping people kind of own their experience and not undersell themselves. Aaron, did I miss anything about mindset calls? I want to make sure
No,
I didn't do it justice.
Yeah, no, you totally did it justice. And Craig, I appreciate you like bringing that up. Honestly, I think the whole CSL like curriculum is transformative for your career materials, right? It changes the way you're showing up as a candidate and the way you're interacting with the job search process. But you were changing too, like going through all of your old stuff, bringing it up and being able to articulate these stories in a powerful way. Sometimes there's grief in the way and we don't even realize it. Sometimes it feels like anger or like annoyance or avoidance. Like, I just can't get myself to do this. And when we kind of like dig in, it's like, oh, there's more there. And so it's amazing. And I think that's the power of community, is not being in a silo, not doing it alone. And sometimes it's just popping on and listening to things and hearing other people kind of processing. You kind of start to do the same thing for things that you didn't even know needed to be processed. So I think that's the magic of a group coaching program overall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I will say, like, we have looked at, various other degrees of programs that offer help with your resume or, reviews of your portfolio and things like that. But I have yet to find one that really looks at both of these things, your career and your life, right? It's hard to like decouple those things. And I think these mindset calls really help, unlock blocks that help you not only reach these career goals and milestones faster, but, you know, in the longer term and in the shorter term, help you as a person. So yeah, we are constantly balancing life and career type topics, I guess we could say, in Career Strategy Lab.
Yeah, I think it's a good balance too, right? Like the Tuesday call gets into some of the work and the Wednesday gets into more of like the human side. And I'll just say, like, quick shout out to CSL. I've made some really great relationships to the point where like I had a standing Friday meeting with someone else in our cohort just to like catch up and see how each other were doing, right? So I think there's a lot of like that relationship building and that sort of like community that kind of like comes out in those spaces as well, which is it's powerful. This is a hard thing to do by yourself.
Totally. I'm curious. Okay, two questions. I'll say the questions so we can address one by one here, but let's think about, like, for Meg and Craig, think about, was there a specific mindset shift that you really felt happen personally? And then the second question will be, was there a specific sprint beyond the compass and roadmap sprint that really like made a big difference in your experience? So let's start with the mindset one. Does either of you want to go first?
I can jump in. I know it's one of the things because how do I put this? I have years of experience. I'm grateful that I have experience that I'm able to bring that to the, you know, my process. And then thinking about that when I was joining CSL, part of it was like, why do I have to do this? And that kind of was my stopgap for kind of thinking about it. But then I, you know, got over that. The emotion that was shared from many others, I mean, in terms of their process, started to, you know, as we kind of touched on, really started to shape like, okay, this is, you know, I'm not alone in this journey. There's lots of others in this journey of trying to find work, and it's a little rough. And then the key, so, like, it was in the first couple of weeks, which were I'm still getting used, but somebody said, please, can you like give me feedback in, you know, async? So they had one of the sprints and they wanted async. And that's when I started to key in like, oh, people want to hear your thoughts. And then I took it as an opportunity to learn to help again, because when you have years of experience and you're in a role, you help mentor earlier in career individuals. And so I started to do that same thing again, and it built my confidence. Like, oh, I do have experience I can bring. I can share some thoughts. They don't have to change their stuff. It's just thoughts. I asked them as questions. And then because of that, the mindset call wasn't like a structured piece, but like it was open. You could be very succinct on a certain project, or how's everybody feeling, you know, with, you know, some level of news that was in the industry. And so having it that open helped me navigate into a space where how can I help and how can that help me?
I think in terms of the mindset shift, you know, I think a back-to-back layoff is a really like unique mental space to be in. I think you like build yourself back up after the first one, and then to have it happen again, it's sort of like when you're in the ocean and like the waves keep coming, right? And so I think like just I came in with a lot of frustration, I think, around that. And I think just like having a space and working on sort of a mindset shift around resilience, I think was really helpful. I know we talk about like confidence and sort of like imposter syndrome. Those absolutely, I think, are things that came up a lot. But I think for me in particular, just like working through, you know, week over week, some of this like resiliency piece, and, you know, having the space to like know that I could come and sort of bring some of my frustrations, I think was really helpful. And then also just, you know, Sarah mentioned like it's there are sprints and it's very templatized. And so there's sort of this, you know, patience and like faith mindset you get to get into of like, okay, just kind of work the process, right? You can be frustrated, but like do the work and keep moving in the right direction, and eventually it'll kind of pay off. So I think all of that was really a big unlock for me.
Yeah, as we say all the time, trust the process. As cliche as that is, like, don't overthink it. Trust the process. Trust us. Trust that the people that have gone before you have succeeded. So if you did what they did, whoa, you should succeed too. And one thing I'll just add as a thing you could write on a Post-it note, but progress over perfection and focus on minimum viable resume, minimum viable portfolio. It doesn't mean a trashy portfolio. It means you can get hired with a good enough resume and a good enough portfolio. It doesn't need to be pixel perfect, level here. So yeah, but thinking back to this
Actually,
sprint,
that's a really good point, Sarah. That brings up for me. So on every, like by Sunday, Pacific time, there's like a weekly deadline to submit things for critique, and getting into the mentality of just like every week I'm going to try and submit something. I signed up for the 12-week program, so I only had 12 weeks. And so like, don't worry about making it perfect. Come Sunday, whatever state it's in, like we're going to submit it and we're going to get some feedback. I think that was really also like really powerful for me in terms of not spending 3 weeks like over rotating on every comma and every pixel, right? And just sort of getting to this idea of like, let's just keep kind of progressing. I don't know if anybody else on the call has a little bit of perfectionism in their background, but
me.
this is very helpful for that if you're struggling with that piece.
And then the second question was, out of the sprints, so there's these 5 sprints. You'll see them in a second, but Craig and Meg, does one stick out to you in terms of like, man, that was game changer for me? It's okay if you're like, no, they were all great, but if there is one, it'd be great to hear.
Mine was definitely the portfolio section, with the framing of headlines and the effort it took to get, how do I explain headlines to people? So with each page in your portfolio, there's a reason that page is in your portfolio, and being really clear why that page is in your portfolio is demonstrated in a headline. And CSL has a process for understanding that and how you go about writing it. And I think that was the biggest game changer in terms of when I got to an interview process. I knew each page made sense because I had gotten feedback from the CSL crew. I'd gotten feedback from the other people in my cohort, like Meg, and I could see the story because I'd written it all out in headlines before putting it to visuals. And I won't say it's easy for me. I'm not a great writer, but it was absolutely game changing because it works. So you have the confidence, and you also know you've put the work in to get a great presentation.
Yeah, I think that was definitely my most impactful sprint as well. +1 to everything Craig said about the headlines. Like, I used a critique for the headlines for every case study and then did a separate critique for like all the slide sort of content as well. That's how I think important it was for me to like be able to get feedback in both those spaces. I'll just also call out, the templates that Sarah's put together. I think you can spend a lot of time going in circles about like, how do I want to visually represent the different pieces of my case study? And I am not a designer. I'm a researcher, and so that is not my forte. And so really having a proven template that I could work from and start from was such a like more streamlined experience than any other time I've tried to put these materials together. So I think there's just was a lot of power for me in that as well.
And okay, here's a pop question, which was not on our list of potential questions I was going to ask, but I'm curious because you both mentioned the portfolio sprint. In both of your jobs, whether it's this week, next month, next year, you're more than likely going to have to make a presentation about something, whether Meg, it's like research findings, or Craig, it's like some feature prioritization or pitch to some stakeholder or department at Dexcom or something. Do you think that the approach that we took to making a portfolio presentation will help you in the future to make potentially a presentation that is not a portfolio?
I'm still going to do headlines for sure. And then I shared like how I set up the visual side, and that was a process that I didn't realize I did, that I was able to then share with the CSL, but it was using the templates that CSL had set up. And so I will carry that, the setup and the headlines, through to going forward for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think for research too, like we love words and we're not always so good about putting together easily sort of digestible visuals. And so it was a good forcing function to think about like, okay, instead of me just sharing a screenshot of a doc that has like 20 questions in it that nobody can read while you're presenting it, right? What is sort of a more impactful way to showcase what this research covers, or like what the intention of it was, what we learned. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that, like how to get to a like more visual representation of research that was really powerful for me.
Yeah, we often say behind the scenes in our team chat, like this should just be called the communication strategy lab, because yes, it's about strategy for your career, but you know, when you really boil it down, a lot of it is just helping everyone learn how to communicate and articulate what their value is, what they did, why they made certain decisions, etc. And that becomes very transferable, you know, whether it's learning to write more clearly through our kind of case study writing process or the resume bullet point process, or if it's, as you said, Meg, like looking at something that could be a really dense slide with 100 words or 1,000 words and figure out, no, how do I make this a little bit more easy to consume? So that is actually a really awesome segue to our little mini portfolio training here. 10 minutes. I'm trying to force myself to keep this to 10 minutes. We have not shared this little portfolio training with anyone yet. It's something that I've been mulling over for a while, and I finally sat down and put it together. So let me just share my screen. All right, so I'm going to start a timer for myself. So mini portfolio training, really thinking about, we have all these users of portfolio. How the heck do we meet all of their needs? Because they all have different needs. And how do we do this with one portfolio? Because there's a lot of advice about portfolios out there. And I've even heard of people making different versions, one that they send when they apply for the job, one when they maybe make contact with like the hiring manager, then they have another version for the interviews. And that's great if you have the time, but if you're recently laid off, you probably don't have the time or energy. And even if you're not laid off, it's a lot of time and energy to make these multiple versions. So before we get into how do we do this, really quick kind of reframe of who are the users of our portfolio. Now, we're really simplifying this, but we have to think of the process to get hired in these 3 steps, right? There's a vetting step where someone's deciding, are you even going to get an interview or not? That person is normally the recruiter, someone in HR. They potentially are going through hundreds of applicants, right? Then we get to the interviews where these people probably want to know a little bit more than that recruiter or HR person. So we're talking about hiring managers, those future peers and colleagues that might be in panel interviews and things like that, right? And then, of course, the offer. So what are some, these are not all, just some of the traits of all of these people, right? We know they're vetting a really high volume of candidates, right? Sometimes hundreds for each role. And they're busy, their time is limited, especially if you think they might not just be hiring for one role, they might be hiring for multiple roles. So if they have 200 applicants for 4 positions, you know, 200 times 4, that's a lot of people to go through, right? They want to see examples, exact examples of your skills in action. It's not just enough to say what you did. We know they're skimming through your portfolio, but here's the thing. They will start reading if you make it easy for them to read, which we're going to see in a moment. And like we just saw on that other slide, we have to design a portfolio that's going to meet the needs of the person that might be skimming really quickly versus the person that might be reading a little bit more. Because as I said, they will read if you make it easy. Similar to people only spend 6 seconds on your resume. Well, if you give them a reason to spend more than 6 seconds, they'll spend more than 6 seconds. So what level of detail do they want? Again, super simplified, but we have to think the further along in the process, the more level of detail they are looking for. So how do we meet their needs, right? Without creating a separate portfolio for each of them. And we do this through, drum roll, the inverted pyramid from journalism. So I did not invent this. If you Google it, there's all kinds of content out there about this. But essentially, the inverted pyramid from journalism says that in a story, let's say a news article, it's going to start with the most important information, right? The lead. Then after the lead, there's going to be some supporting information, also known as the body. And then at the end of the article, there might be extra background information, interesting facts, etc. So how does this play out in the real world? So what I'm trying to show you is this article that I found all about Taylor Swift. Is Taylor Swift going to be the cheerleader for the 2025 season for the Chiefs, right? And let's look at how this idea of the lead, body, and tail apply to this article. So if we look at this, well, guess what? This, will Taylor Swift return as Chiefs cheerleader for 2024-25? And then this subtitle of Swift made appearances at 13 Chiefs games last season to watch boyfriend Travis Kelce and his team. He was also spotted at some of her Eras Tours concerts. That is the lead. If I am busy, if I'm one of those people that only reads the headlines, which we all do from time to time, I still can have a takeaway from this article, right? Because it has a really good lead, which is a combination of that title and that kind of subtitle there. Then if I keep reading as we go down the article, we are getting to the body, right? So we're hearing about the Chiefs season. We're not going to read this whole article together, but as we go down the article, it's providing us with more information to essentially back up and support what was in that title and subtitle at the top of the article. And as we go down the article further and further, and we're not going to do it for the sake of time, the article essentially ends with like relevant information to Taylor and Travis, but it's less related to the season. And it's more like, well, in this city, Taylor like wore an outfit that was the same color as the Chiefs. Therefore, the relationship must be really serious. And it's kind of just giving us extra tidbits and information that if we read the article and we made it through kind of halfway through, it's going to be interesting information for us to consume. So when we think about the inverted pyramid, and you'll see this when you read an article later today, when you watch a news story, if you watch the news at night, you'll see this play out where they hook you in at the beginning of the article or the beginning of the little interview on the TV with a really strong lead. Then they tell you more, which is the body of the story. And then at the end, it's kind of like dessert, almost like some extra stuff that's nice if you made it that far in the story or the interview. All right, so then we're going to keep going. And here's the thing too. You will see this play out even on things like carousel posts that you see on LinkedIn or on Instagram, or even you see this concept play out if people write posts on X or threads that are like those multiple tweets or whatever they're called in a row. You see people in that first tweet, for example, they're trying to get a lead in there to get your attention. Then there's maybe 5 more tweets that form the body. And then maybe the last 1 or 2 tweets is kind of like the tail of what they are communicating. Now, your portfolio can use this same structure. And let me zoom out a little bit so you guys can see. Great. So how does this apply to your portfolio? Well, as Craig said, we're looking at, and let's zoom in a little bit here. We're looking at a mock slide of a portfolio. Now, before you guys blow up the chat with, well, couldn't a portfolio be a website? You're all smart, just apply this to a website. We're looking at this from the perspective of the portfolio as a presentation. So on each slide, we want there to be a lead. The most important information, or as Craig said, headline. We call it a headline in Career Strategy Lab. And if people only read that headline, that's what we want them to know. And recruiters and hiring managers are probably oftentimes only reading that as they're skimming through your portfolio. Then we get into some body information, and maybe it's this text here, and then over here, this might be considered body information. And then we get to the tail. It's like, if they actually read everything on the slide, great, it's nice extra information, but they don't need to read this information, this should be pink, to understand what's the big idea of this slide. So this inverted pyramid structure, though, only works if you are paying attention to both the content and the design of the slides, which is why the way we teach portfolios, and I've been doing this since 2017, is we separate the writing of the content from the design of the slides so that we don't get distracted and so that we have a really strong story that we are telling. Now, here's the problem. If you don't pay attention to the design, for example, like if everything is the same font size as we've done on this slide, nothing stands out because there's no hierarchy, right? And so there is no inverted pyramid here because everything is literally the same font size. Now, maybe this text, the first sentence, is really well written, but the problem is people won't read that more than likely because what they see is just a lot of text and their brain is like, can't compute, there's no hierarchy, I don't know what to read first. This also doesn't work if you have slides with like giant walls of text, as we say in Career Strategy Lab, where you have multiple lines of text like this, and it's not like chunked out into smaller paragraphs, which makes it easier to read. This is why if you go to any news site, you're going to see like the paragraphs are sometimes just 1 or 2 sentences long because they're making these little chunks of text to make it really easy to read. If you're a designer, you know this, but a lot of people make this mistake in their portfolio. So for each slide in your portfolio, we need to think about what is the lead or the headline. And if someone only reads that 1 or 2 sentences, what do we want them to take away? And then what is the body content of that slide? Really, what information do we need to support whatever we said in that lead or headline? And then the tail, what extra information could serve as extra kind of proof or evidence of our experience, our skills, our expertise, etc. Now, if we do this, then we're meeting the needs of all these people, right? Because the recruiter or hiring manager, they might only read that headline at the top. And then, if you are going to a panel interview and people are looking at your portfolio beforehand, and they might be, peers at the same level as you in the team, they might be reading more, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be working alongside you every single day versus the recruiter or hiring manager, recruiter or HR person. They're just really trying to figure out, like, does this person on paper seem like they have the skills and experience that match the job description, right? A couple of things, so a couple of cautions really quick. I don't want you to take this literally and think that I'm saying every slide in your portfolio must be laid out like this. This is not meant to be like a literal wireframe that every single slide needs to follow, because a few people I showed this to, they thought that, so I want to make that clear. And then the other thing I want to make clear is that not every slide will always have body and tail content. And I wish it was as easy as like rules that you can follow and it's super black and white. But let's face it, a lot of this can be subjective. So sometimes, for example, like the body information might be a visual or no visual, just like this slide we are literally looking at right now. And if we look back at all these slides we've gone through, you'll see this exact structure playing out on all the slides. So this is just a kind of example to show you, this inverted pyramid framework, I guess, could play out in these 4 different layouts, right? And again, this isn't meant to say these are the only 4 layouts you can ever use. There's a ton more, infinite, really. Anyway, that is the inverted pyramid structure. So to recap, we want to make sure that these slides in our portfolio, if we go back to, I don't know, let's start here. This one, that somewhere on the slide, we're making sure there is always a headline. And then where it makes sense, there is body content and sometimes maybe this tail content. So I'm curious if any of you have heard about the inverted pyramid structure before, or if you are working on your slides right now, if this helps you wrap your mind around a little bit more, like, how do I take maybe these case studies I've written and literally lay them out on slide format or webpage if you want to, right? So that is our little inverted pyramid structure, which we are borrowing from the land of journalism to really help us craft clearer, more effective stories and have really effective slides. And like, if you're not working on a portfolio, but you're working on some other presentation, this could still apply to whatever you are doing. All right, so the last thing we want to do, we're going to try and keep this under 8 minutes, let's say. I know a bunch of you were asking on email before this event, and I see some private messages too in the chat, questions specific to Career Strategy Lab. So we thought it'd just be easy to walk you through really quick rundown of what happens in Career Strategy Lab. And I'm going to skip a few slides in the interest of time. So as we said, we are all about helping people create a career that lets them live the life they want to live. And we really believe that the greatest product you'll ever work on is you. And so we do this through this career coaching incubator and job search accelerator, where we teach people in user experience and product development and tech how to design and market and really sell themselves in their career. And people that have worked with us have been hired at all kinds of companies. You heard Nextdoor and Dexcom today from Meg and Craig. We have a ton more companies that we don't have space to list the logos for, and all disciplines, right? We heard from Meg, who's a researcher, and Craig's more on the design side of things, but we've also had people who are UX writers and information architects and web designers and graphic designers and product managers and kind of everything under this umbrella of world of UX and product. And they've been hired at countries around the world. I think we're up to 34 countries where people are from and then joined Career Strategy Lab. Career stages is a question we get asked all the time too. The current breakdown is constantly shifting. The current breakdown of about the past year is we see 15% of people who are kind of earlier in their career, and then people that are switching. We see a lot of people switching from nursing and teaching and journalism, even attorneys. And then climbers, people that have already been working, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 20 plus years, and wanting to advance, whatever that means to them. So we talked about those sprints, right? The 5 sprints. And here we're showing you how we break down the process of designing and marketing and selling yourself into these 5 sprints, where we first start with the career roadmap, and then we go work on your resume and your LinkedIn. And then we get into job search and relationships. Sprint 4 is all about case studies and portfolio. We wait to do portfolio until we've done these other 3 things, because the idea is if we can get your resume and your LinkedIn profile and kind of get you kickstarted on relationships, that can be attracting potential opportunities and helping nurture relationships and increasing your visibility, especially on LinkedIn, while you are then working on your portfolio. So that's why we do that in that order. And then within the world of Career Strategy Lab, it's really centered around how do we give you the best curriculum, the best coaching, and the best community? And so we thought it would be useful to show you, and I'm still sharing my screen, show you the community, and then show you inside our curriculum hub. So this is our community. I blurred out people's names, photos, just for privacy reasons. But really, over here at the left, we have all these different kind of areas in the community that are really focused on helping you have specific conversations, stay accountable, etc. So for example, like every day we have these sprint check-ins, and every week where you come in, I'm not going to click in because then you'll see people's faces and we only blurred them out on this screen, but we have these accountability threads. We have an asynchronous co-working lounge, and then we have areas specific to like resume questions, or we're in the compass section or portfolio, etc. And then we have a really active alumni lounge as well there. And then when you join Career Strategy Lab, and I didn't get to pull this up before this call because I had a tech issue, but you end up getting access to our curriculum, where it's going to look like this, except it's going to look like this. And you get access to all of these courses. So they all correspond to a sprint, right? So designing your career roadmap, your resume, LinkedIn, job search, etc., all the call recordings, mindset calls, all of that stuff. And then if we dive into, say, the resume course, and then it's very organized, there's all the downloads, and then it's breaking it down in these super bite-sized chunks that make this all super manageable. So thinking about like the writing of your resume and the specific parts of your resume and the intro and your name and contact and work experience and the bullets, etc. And then the design of your resume, and not just designing one, but designing a human optimized one and a applicant tracking system optimized one, etc. And so all the courses are broken down in a very similar, granular way like that. And then, like we said, we have these Tuesday Q&A calls and mindset calls on Wednesdays. We also give you tons of templates, which Craig and Meg mentioned. We use Google Docs just because they're the software that people are most familiar with, right? Because not everyone is like a Notion buff or something. So we use Google Docs, and there's these templates for your resume, writing your portfolio template here. Even Google Sheets around helping you be engaged on LinkedIn with posting prompts, a plan for engagement so you can be more visible, etc. And like we said, this is not just me here. This is a team. And so we have 4 coaches and Emma, but Emma's really behind the scenes, who are experts in really design, marketing, and sales. We each bring our own kind of like focus to this experience. And one person named Sarah, just coincidentally, same name as me, she'd said that the scale of materials blew my mind, and that if I realized how broken down everything was, I don't think I would have waited so long to join. So I guess I should hire her as a copywriter or something like that. All right, so a couple of things to know. We let people into Career Strategy Lab kind of on a rolling basis here. So Career Strategy Lab, we have a 3-month version and a 6-month version. The only difference is the length. So what we're looking at right now is the 3-month version, where it's $3,600. But if you pay in full, you save a little bit. It's $3,000. And like we said, we'll give you another extra month in the program if you want. But really the only difference between 3 and 6 months is the time. So if you need a little bit more time, if you know maybe you have a busy couple of months coming up, but you still want to do this, that gives you some extra time. And I know we have some alumni here. So if you complete your 3 or 6 months and you decide, I want to stay longer, like you can do that. We have these month-to-month plans for after if you want to. And if you're alumni, you can totally just email us and we will tell you all about those and give you the link to join us. And I think that's all. We do also work with a financing partner who we've been partnering with for almost 2 years now, which blows my mind. And so you'll see on this page, we'll link you to links to explore the options with our financing partner. It's called Elective, and I just wanted to show you this screenshot so you're not wondering who the heck is Elective. That's the company we work with. I know there are probably questions, so I want to give opportunity if anyone has quick questions, although Becca and Aaron may have been answering them while I was going through those slides and fixing a few little tech issues with our journalism pyramid. But let's see, I think that is all that we have for today. So we hope, number one, that you learned something new today about the job search. Maybe you learned something new about yourself, or maybe you just feel a little bit more ease about whatever situation you're in by hopefully realizing that, you know, you are not alone in this struggle of navigating, you know, a current job search or thinking back to previous job searches, or maybe you're happily employed, but you're trying to figure out what your next career move is. All of those scenarios are not easy to figure out alone. And I think so many of us, it's very easy to get down on ourselves and think that we're the only ones who struggle with this, but everyone struggles with this. It's not easy. It's not stuff that is taught in school or that your boss teaches you and things like that. And so let's see here. We want to thank Meg and Craig. I know everyone appreciated hearing your stories and your perspective. And thanks to Aaron and Becca for answering questions in the chat, etc. And thanks to all of you for showing up. I know giving us an hour of your time in the middle of the day is not always easy. I hope it was worth your time. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or send us an email. We're happy to point you to different resources or answer questions related to Career Strategy Lab. So that is all, everyone. Aaron, I don't know if you're still here, or Becca, but were there any questions you saw that you thought we should like verbally talk out here?
No, I think we covered everything. We had a more recent question just about, you know, is CSL limited to certain areas of the world? And no, everywhere. So
yeah,
we answered, yep. And that's a frequently asked question. I think, you know, that question, and then people wondering, is this just for a specific career stage? That's another frequently asked question that we covered.
Yeah, and it ebbs and flows, the kind of the types of people that are in Career Strategy Lab. But like we said, this is not just for beginners or people that just graduated, you know, from a degree program or a boot camp or something. We have people from all career stages, because here's the thing, like though the information and the content of, say, your resume and of your portfolio will be different for someone who is seeking their first job versus someone with 20 years of experience. Obviously, your experience differs, and so the content in your resume and portfolio will differ. But the process to create that resume, to create that portfolio, that is the same. And as Meg and Craig both said, by doing this in community, even if you, let's say, have 3 years of experience and you're on a Q&A call and you're looking at someone's portfolio because we're asking a question from someone, you know, that's been working for 20 years and we're answering questions about their portfolio, you still might be able to have a takeaway from, you know, the critique and advice that we're offering that person, and vice versa, right? Someone with 20 years of experience might see something that someone with 3 or 1 years of experience did in their portfolio and still learn something. So yeah, like I see how it's easy to be skeptical and think, oh, well, like I couldn't possibly learn something if I have 20 years of experience, or, oh, I have 1 year of experience. Am I going to be kind of the fish out of the water here? But that is not the case at all. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I know we went over, And thank you again to Meg and Craig, and I'll follow up over email with both of you. And that's all. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. And we will see you somewhere on LinkedIn, on Instagram, in the inbox, or maybe at another workshop that we do. All right. Bye, everyone. See you later.